If I had a nickel for every time that a movie adaptation of a new adult book featuring a love interest who was into boxing came out this year, I'd have two nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's strange that it happened twice. So I was scrolling through the on-demand selections the other day, just seeing what's new, what's hot, what's trending, what's out there for me to peruse, and this movie called Perfect Addiction came up. So I watched the trailer because it had Ross Butler in it, who is the OG Reggie from Riverdale, so I'm always curious just to see how his career path took him, you know, since he chose to do 13 Reasons Why over continuing with Riverdale. It's always just interesting to see, like, would've, could've, should've, like, did he flourish and is now the next Marvel superhero, or should he have stayed with Riverdale? Hard to tell, because I don't really think that there's like a best option in either of those situations. So yeah, I was interested to check it out, and as soon as I saw the trailer, I texted my friend and I said, this has to be a new adult book, right? This has to be based on one of those ones that we downloaded on our Kindles and secretly read hidden under our desks in like 10th grade, right? So I really wanted to check it out because, like I said, these movies are like Hallmark movies in a way for me, you know, where it's like you go into them knowing they're never gonna be great, right? But you're gonna get something out of them at least. They're gonna be entertaining. And I do think for a majority of this, what I appreciate about the afterverse, I guess you could call these, the Wattpad universe, if you will, of stories that get turned into books and then movies that you just instantly know someone wrote that thinking of a One Direction member in their head and then turned it into a story in 2015. This is the newest one in that, and I actually hadn't heard of Perfect Addiction, like I said, and when I did look it up, the interesting thing is it's the second one in a series. It's obviously like one of those ones where it's like each book is about like a different character and a different couple, so it's not like, oh, we're skipping a whole story, but it is strange that like they were like, no, let's start with the second one and not the first one. And like I mentioned before, it's also interesting the timing of it because it comes out right around the same time as Beautiful Disaster, which I haven't read either of those books, so comparison wise I don't quite know what they're about. Obviously there's differences in that in Perfect Addiction they're both fighters, and in Beautiful Disaster only the love interest is a boxer, but I do think it's interesting that both these books got turned into movies so close to each other and they have so many similarities, at least in terms of like boxing being a main component of them, which is especially funny when you consider that right now the hot trend on Book Talk is hockey, not boxing, but that's a whole different topic to get into. So yeah, I wanted to check it out for a variety of reasons. It was an hour and 37 minutes. Another thing I love about these so-called after movies that they get in, they get out. Thankfully, this one kept the music montages to a minimum, which was really great. I did appreciate that because my gosh, when you're watching a movie that's only an hour and 37 minutes and you're on your 14th time hearing a acoustic cover of an Imagine Dragons song, you really have to wonder about where your life choices have brought you. But this one, like I said, didn't have a lot. So the main story, and it gets into like the whole chunk. Like you watch the trailer, everything you see that happens in the trailer happens legitimately in like the first 10 minutes of this movie. Like they get you going, and I appreciate that so much. So it starts with Sienna talking about how she fell in love with this boxer who, honestly, for the majority of the movie, like, I was just getting Channing Tatum vibes from him, and that's not a dig at all. I feel like Channing Tatum is a very charismatic actor. Like, I was just seeing, like, OG, like, that kind of, like, a-hole, douchey kind of vibe of the characters that Channing Tatum played, you know, from Jax. So Jax is, like, this street fighter. He's rough and tumble. Sienna and him end up falling for each other. He breaks his leg because he rides his motorcycle dangerously. I don't know. And she has to nurse him back to health and teach him how to train all over again. And then he's better than he's ever been. They're training. They're in love. They're on top of the world. She's meal prepping for this man every night. And when she comes home early one day, she finds him repaying her for all of this by hooking up with her sister and not even bothering to lock the door when she walks in. I mean, I guess she could have had a key, but it just seemed like you could have had more precautions in place. She finds that out, instantly devastated, runs away, obviously, and is like, I want nothing to do with either of you, which is shocking to both of them. I think that was what was so shocking to me for a majority of this movie, was she was rightfully mad. Like, cheating's one thing. Cheating with, like, your sister is a whole other thing, and the amount of people in this movie that were just like, you're being too hard on him. Like, you've just got to let this go. And I'm like, does she though? Because as far as my timeline's been, it's been like, a few weeks, maybe a couple months, and I feel like, yeah, it's gonna take at least a year to get over that, okay? Like, at least a good year. So it was just interesting to see that kind of thing of people being like, you gotta forgive your sister. You gotta let this go. This anger's gonna hurt you. And I'm like, yeah, it's gonna hurt her in the long run, but maybe give her like a month to deal with this. So she now has no house to stay at, so she ends up finding this room for rent by another boxer named Caden, who initially wants nothing to do with her, but she makes a deal with him that she will train him, since she knows Jax, like all his ins and outs so well, she'll train him to be better than Jax and beat him, and in turn she just wants a room to stay because, you know, she doesn't want to be sleeping on the bus bench anymore. And I feel like that's a fair trade. So obviously right away he's like, look, he gets the man voice, right? The, look, you might be here, but like, this is just a job, okay? And she's like, no problem, I'm not falling for a fighter ever again. And he's like, great. And it leads up to the big rematch between her and Jax and Caden. It's really a rematch between like her watching Caden and Jax fight, but honestly, like the entire time, like they just talk about how good of a fighter Sienna is, and you constantly see her just beating ass, like everyone, she just dominates. And then I'm like, throw her in the ring with Jax, like screw this, she should have been trained to be the one that takes him down, because I trust her to beat him more than anyone else. Like that would have been super satisfying. So pros and cons for this movie. Let's get into the cons first, because I like being negative right out of the gate and then ending on a positive note, right? I feel like for me a big part of this was Jax, okay? I feel like, again, I said before how it was weird how everyone was kind of like, you gotta forgive. It was more directed toward the sister, but even with Jax, people were like, you just gotta let it go, okay? And I'm like, no, she gave 3 years of her life to this guy who is manipulating her, and the entire time that he's with her sister, he's coming back around to her and being like, you know, just say the word and I'll dump your sister and come back to you. And she's like, I don't want that. That's horrifying. And the fact that you would even talk about my sister like that horrifies me. And he's like, but it doesn't. And it's supposed to be like this little like game they play, and instead I'm just like, no, he never like gets his comeuppance. Like, yeah, he gets beaten, but like after everything that happens, when he literally punches her in the face and knocks her unconscious for 3 days accidentally, jail. That man should be in jail. And the fact that she's just like, look, I forgive you, okay? Like, you're not in love with me, but I hope that you do work on yourself so someday you could find someone to love you when you are whole. I'm just like, no, this man needs to be in jail. There are multiple times where I would have called and been like, arrest this man. Jail for him. Even if it's his apology, he's like, I didn't see it was you till it was too late to stop punching someone. And I was like, okay, but you were still gonna punch Caden that hard and knock him out. So that was just a whole thing for me. And then I think a big con for me too was I was actually checking out the book afterwards, just reading, like, I haven't finished it, but like just reading like scenes and stuff like that. And I think the book is so much better, which is crazy to say, because I feel like normally with these new adult ones, they're so like anti-feminist, like the main love interest is just a raging douche and you're like, wow girl, how could you ever do this to yourself? But Caden's so sweet. There's actually this really nice part in the book where Jax comes up all like, blah, 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 and is like, you give her back to me, Sienna's mine or whatever, and Caden's like, well, first of all, she's not yours or mine to give back to you, she's her own person. And I just really like that. It gave me big like Reese vibes when he was talking about Feyre in the second ACOTAR book, when he's like, look, you're gonna get beat to a bloody pulp if you try and come for her, and when she's done with you, then I'm gonna beat you up. Like, it was just really nice. And especially, it is a more recent one. I think it came out in 2019, so it's definitely not in that like 2012 where all the like girls were like, oh, I'm so clumsy, and then like the guy would be like, wow, and then they fall in love, you know? So I was surprised that they didn't keep all that in. And then there were also so many cuter moments in the book that I'm like, how did this not make it into the movie? And it's a quick movie, but still, for the scenes that they did keep in, I'm like, we so could have seen more of their relationship develop. Like, I feel like they kept in the paint scene, which was really cute, but then there's also like a fun paintball scene in the book. There's a really cute dancing scene that they have. There's just like all these moments where it's like, oh, you see like they're like flirting with each other and there's like this like attraction, but they're like, no, we can't do anything because like it'll distract from like what's happening. And that makes sense, as opposed to this kind of just like not talking about it at all in the movie. It's weird that, because I'm also hearing this about the Beautiful Disaster one, which I haven't read or watched yet, but people are saying like, watch the movie first, then read the book, because if you read the book first and then watch the movie, you won't be able to enjoy the movie at all. And I feel like that's kind of the case with this, because after reading parts of the book, I'm like, wait, like I would have rather seen this. Like, it just seems like it's bare bones of what the book was. So that being said, positives, I do have to say, and I think the biggest thing that like sold me on this movie and made me like enjoy it, the chemistry between Sienna and Caden, so good. Like I said, I think again Caden is a very like good love interest for the majority of it. Like even when it's like he leaves her at the end or whatever, you know, and there's that moment of like, I'm doing what's best for you, you kind of believe it because girl just got knocked out for like 3 days unconscious. So you're like, yeah, I get it, even though that wasn't your fault. Like I could get where you're like, that's terrifying and I'm scared that I'm attached to someone that could just like, that could happen to them, so bye. And there's also like a really nice story about her, and especially the juxtaposition between like Jax and Caden, and how Jax always discouraged her from fighting and like going out on her own and being her own fighter, whereas Caden like one encourages that, but also like is very much like, if that's what you want to do, I would support you. Like he's never like, you should do this, why aren't you doing this? It's like he's like, no, I think you should do this, and then like realizes like she will always hold herself back. And like he even like the words he uses when he's like, you're just gonna like live in my shadow, like that didn't even upset me because it's true. Because like the first thing we see her saying when she like goes to work with Caden, she's like, I need a new project to distract myself. And then later Caden's like, I'm not just a project. And I'm like, normally that would upset me, but like you're actually like, you actually see her and like understand what her like insecurities are. So like I was like, I understand that. And like I said, Ross, and I don't know who the actress is, but Ross and the actress had such good chemistry. Like I was totally buying it. This is one thing, I should have listened to this in the cons, but it was also strange. And I think again, maybe this was just like, I don't know if it's in the book, but maybe this was just like a time thing. But like in the beginning, she establishes that she doesn't really have family, even though she grew up in this place. So we don't know what exactly happened with the family aside from her sister. So she's like, I got my sister and I got my best friend Brent. And you're like, okay, I get it. Like you've probably grown up together or are like really close. But then it's like, she doesn't know that Brent has a brother, Caden. She hasn't met Brent's fiance. And you're like, do you know this man? Or is this just someone like that you grabbed and make this a 3 thing? Like it was just very strange where she's like, these are the people that I'm closest to in the world. And it's like, you don't know his fiance and you don't know even that he has a brother. Like it was very interesting with that. But yeah, their chemistry is a big thing that sold me. I thought it was really, really cute. And again, I think their reasons for staying apart make more sense than normally. Like normally it's like just to create conflict and it's annoying. But I feel like this, like they had something that it's like, we could lose a lot if we get distracted or if this doesn't work out. And she had already been burned by a fighter. And again, I feel like more, you had in the books more too of him like understanding where she was coming from with Jax and wanting to give her space and respect for that. And I feel like, again, he wasn't a bad character by any means, especially compared to like Hardin or like other like new adult love interests that we see. He was actually very like mature, but I feel like it would have just added more depth to see that, for her to be able to open up more about that and him be like, yeah, that's awful and like I give you space and I'm not gonna hurt you like him, but I understand like you need space, and just not like, again, not like he pressured her, but it's like he never really dived into that in the movie, and I would have liked that since that was a character of his in the book. And I felt like he was just allowed to be a little more lighthearted and funny in the book. Obviously there's more scenes, but like I feel like I would have liked to see more of that instead of just kind of like this stoic gruff guy who then like slowly opens up to her. But it was really cute, and I do like the flipping of the trope of like when they do first hook up, she's like, you know, if you just want it to be like one night and we pretend it never happened, that's fine. And he's like, no. And she's like, but? And he's like, no buts. Like I just thought that was really cute because it's different than what you normally see in a lot of those stereotypical things. So yeah, I think again for me a big thing was the chemistry, and I also just liked that a lot of it felt more realistic in a way. Like it wasn't like, again, conflict sake or like them being annoying or her putting up with stuff. Like I liked that they were like, Jax is an a-hole. I wish they had explored more of like he should pay for being an a-hole, not just like he should get beat up or something like that. But overall, I think it was an enjoyable Friday night watch. Like, would I go to the theaters and watch it? No. Are you gonna catch me probably at midnight when an Insomnia episode is coming on and I can't sleep watching it for the 40th time? Absolutely. Am I glad to see Ross Butler thriving and surviving? 100,000%. And he is such a good love interest. Like, let me tell you right now, I'm like, okay, Riverdale, you're 2 for 2 on the Reggies you cast. I see you. I see you. So yeah, if you have seen this movie, please let me know what you thought, especially compared to the book. Like I said, since I'm in the middle of reading that, and it's very interesting to see. Again, I would say like the movie isn't, it's different, but it's almost like, it's like they just took like the bare bones, and like the book gets into more of like the characterization, cute scenes, stuff like that. So yeah, it's very interesting. But if you have seen it, let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments. Also make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!